parts of the states in pursuit of this creature. But inadvertently during his investigation, he came across a crashed UFO incident from the 1950s, which he's going to talk about today, and which is sort of directly related to everything that's going on this weekend. So give a round of applause for Jon, please.
Does this work? No, it doesn't. Can anybody give me a sound on this one?
Doesn't work.
Once upon a time, having been an old rock star, I like to have... I don't like those microphones you have to clip on. Oh, dear God. It goes away from the principle of the thing, having to hold something that looks like a cigarette lighter in your hand when you're talking.
So you want to set it on?
Yeah, if you can do that, guys. If you can't, don't worry.
Test.
Thanks a lot, mate. Yes, as Nick said, I am Jon Downes. I'm the director of an organisation called the Centre for Fortean Zoology. And I travel all over the world investigating accounts of mystery animals, new and unknown species of animal. And we have an organisation now, we've got nearly 400 members, and we are funding research all the way across the globe. Now, I'm here under complete false pretenses because I'm not a ufologist. I'm not a ufologist at all. 6 years ago, I wrote 2 books about UFOs purely in order to pay for my divorce. However, no matter where I go, when I'm actually carrying on my straightforward zoological research, bloody UFOs keep on coming in again. It's like they sort of drag me kicking and screaming away from orthodox science, and I find myself confronted by things which cannot be explained within normal, orthodox, accepted scientific parameters. Now, when I was approached in September of 1997 to go to Puerto Rico, a guy I'd never seen before phoned me up and said, "Hey John, do you want to go for 2 months in the middle of the English winter? We'll pay you to go and look for a vampire on an island in the Caribbean." Oh yeah. Have any of you ever been in England in the winter? Did I believe in the chupacabra? By the way, for those of you who don't know it, this is the chupacabra. Did I really believe that there was a strange creature that looked like Sonic the Hedgehog on acid that was going around attacking the domestic livestock of small peasant farmers in an island in the middle of the Caribbean? Did I believe it? No, of course I didn't. The whole idea is fundamentally nonsense. And I went there because I thought the Channel 4 TV programme could pay for me to have a nice Caribbean holiday. How wrong I was. That's me, considerably younger, considerably lighter, and with much less hair. This guy here, a guy called Ruben, he was a police officer who was assigned to look after us during our trip. And like I said, when I came back from England, it was rather interesting. It was the first time I've actually driven in the front of a police car. But we'll come back to this guy later because he is really important. But we travelled around Puerto Rico for several weeks, and slowly and inexorably I began to realise that this thing is real, and that I was no longer on a free subsidised holiday from a British television company. I was actually investigating something which is seriously, seriously weird. Now, has anybody here been to Puerto Rico? Cool. You know the Dorado sector just down from the Eliante rainforest. Right in the middle of the island, you've got the last stretch of the virgin Caribbean rainforest. It was the last place that the Caribbeans lived before they were wiped out, and it is one of the last places in the whole of Caribbean where you've got relatively untouched, or untouched until recently, rainforest. In the middle of the rainforest is a little town called Dorado, and outside Dorado there's a lot of small villages with little peasant farmers. Now, we ended up in a farm where they breed roosters for cockfighting. Now, I hate blood sports, but I'm not one of these annoying middle-class Englishmen who goes to a foreign country and tries to tell them how to behave, how to live their life. But I ended up in this farm where 2 days before 95% of the roosters which had been being bred for cockfighting had been killed in a bizarre attack by an animal which has become known as the chupacabra, but which, between you and me, I don't think that's got anything to do with the killings, but we'll come to that in a minute. This is the only chicken that actually survived. That one didn't. I was talking to the farmer, a weird little guy called Osvaldo, who smoked suspiciously long cigarettes all the way through the conversation with me. In fact, the whole farm stank of cannabis. It was great. It was the most fun I've ever had making a TV show. And I asked him what happened to the bodies. And he told me that the bodies had been taken away by somebody from the local government. But I said, well, couldn't you have saved one for me? And he said, Senor, look in that corner. And I looked in that corner, and underneath a very manky-looking thorn bush, there was a dead, desiccated chicken. I sent my deputy, a guy called Graham Inglis, who couldn't be with us tonight, mainly because it cost too much money to fly even one of us over from England. But Graham, with video camera in one hand, and, to be quite honest, one of the suspiciously long cigarettes in the other, crawled underneath a thorn bush and photographed the chicken actually in situ. By the way, I want to apologise for the quality of the pictures, because they were done on, they were taken from an old analog video camera. If you look closer up at this, and I hope you guys haven't had a big lunch, because some of this is spectacularly nasty. I mean, you've heard an awful lot about alien autopsies, but I'm probably the only person who ever meet who's done an autopsy on a chupacabra victim. Now, if you look up here, that is the main rib cage of the animal. And here, you've got a hole about the size as the end of my thumb, which went straight into the rib cage. Up at the top, and I couldn't get any decent stills to be able to show you, on the neck, there are two tiny puncture wounds. My Spanish is absolutely lousy. I can just about buy cigarettes and find my way to the airport. But I found, after 3 weeks wandering around Puerto Rico and Mexico, that I could discuss the finer points of mutilated chickens in Spanish, even though I couldn't actually find the time of day. But if you look up there, you can see there is a big hole in the side of the rib cage. That's a bigger closer up picture. And that's a picture of me, and so is that. I pressed the wrong one. Those two are me taking the chicken apart. Now, I've lived in the tropics for a lot of my life. I've been interested in natural history since I was a little boy. Being a ghoulish little boy of 6 or 7, when I found something dead, I'd cut it up. And I've been cutting up dead animals ever since, all my life. And I have done dissections of everything from an earthworm that's 3 inches long to a whale that's 24 feet. So I know my way around dead bodies reasonably well. Now, when an animal dies in the tropics, within minutes of the death, the micro-predators move in. You're talking about animals like blowflies, burying beetles, centipedes, millipedes, and all over the skin you can see, on any animal dead in the tropics, you can see it's like it's been peppered by shot from a shotgun. Tiny holes where the micro-predators move in to lay their eggs and to eat. The most bizarre thing about this creature was that when I opened the feathers up to get to the skin, I found no micro-predator. This is unheard of. I sent Graham back underneath the thorn bush, where he seemed to be quite happy, and the place was still, there were plenty of burying beetles there were plenty of flies and maggots and bowflies, but nothing on this. It was as if that the creatures, even the minor creatures, even the small invertebrates in the area, knew that this animal had been poisoned and would be poisonous to them. When I opened the creature up, I found there was no blood in the body at all. So there I sent Graham back underneath the thorn tree again, because the ground was it was just dry brown dust. There hadn't been rain for weeks. So I sent him down there with the camera to see if he could find if the blood had soaked into the ground. But there was no blood at all, either in the animal or on the ground. When I opened the animal up, there is a membrane, a diaphragm membrane, which goes between, which separates the body cavity and the thoracic chest cavity in all tetrapods, all four-legged creatures. In this chicken, it was there, it hadn't been broken. But when I opened up the body cavity, and there were no exit or entry holes in the body cavity, the only holes were 2 in the neck and 1 in the chest, which you've just seen, the liver was missing. Now this is unprecedented, because the liver is the largest organ in the body, and how the hell that got out of there, I have no idea. And this is where suddenly I realized that I was no longer on a cheap holiday at Channel 4's expense. I was on the track of probably the biggest mystery of my life. A few weeks later, we ended up in Mexico, and as you can see, courtesy of the wonders of Adobe Photoshop, I've managed to do a really lousy red arrow. And we ended up in the middle of the Puebla Desert. Now, if there's any Mexicans here, I do apologize, because I'm sure I'm mispronouncing it, but the name of the town was Tlaoxtican, I think, Tlaltolitxan. And if anybody can tell me how to pronounce that without sounding like you're clearing your throat, I'll be very, very grateful. But we ended up here, and here's a picture of the little village. It was on the edge of the desert, right under, only 40 to 50 miles from Popocatépetl. There's another picture of it later, because I think that the volcano is very important on this. Now, I need to digress for a second, and please everybody forgive me, I've got to give you a little bit of a history lesson. Back in 1996, 1995 or 1996, the incumbent president of Mexico took 3/4 of the national exchequer and his 15-year-old mistress and bucketed off to Dublin. Well, to be quite honest, somebody gave me £7 million and a 15-year-old mistress and told me to go to Dublin. It's a town I've always had a lot of fun in. You can have a fair amount of sympathy with him. However, you can't have much you have got even more sympathy with the country, which was left practically bankrupt. And a loan was floated to the International Monetary Fund. And one of the main terms of the loan was that there'd be a new Mexican Ministry of Agriculture, and that they would give compensation to farmers whose livestock had died under mysterious circumstances. This does not necessarily mean paranormal circumstances. It could mean struck by lightning or whatever, or hit by a car or whatever. For the first time ever, there was a proper compensation system for the farmers. And the newly formed Agriculture Ministry set up a nationwide network of vets. And this lady is Soledad de la Peña, who was a vet for that part of Mexico. And she was called out on the 28th of July 1996 to the village which I showed you the picture of just now, that one, in order to investigate reports that 3 different farms had had 3 either sheep or goats killed. She got to the place 11 hours late. But when she got there, the animals were still alive. Now this is where the best piece of luck is. I'll go on about the animals later. But Soledad not only had one of the few reasonably good video cameras in that part of Mexico, but she's also a UFO buff and she knows what she's talking about. Now, I'm making no apologies at all for the diabolical quality of the pictures I'm going to show you in a minute. Just remember that they are taken from a low-quality analog videotape which was filming a bootleg videotape on a Mexican television. So guys, if you're expecting high-tech images, tough. However, she showed me a series of very interesting film which showed these little silver objects, which I was much to my surprise when I actually, because you can't see it on the video, when I actually took the frames, and that one in particular is a fairly interesting saucer-like shape. But all of these were coming out of or appeared to be coming out of the crater of Popocatépetl. And this had happened the day before the attacks on the sheep and the goats in the village. Now, how the hell's happened there? We're not supposed to be seeing these for another few minutes. Soledad, this is her on Mexican television trying to keep the peace, because after her findings in the farmyard, you had a near riot situation going on. She arrived 11.5 hours after the animals had been attacked. Now again, I'm really apologising to anybody who's squeamish and had a big lunch. But 11 and a half hours after the animals had been attacked, they were still alive. They were drained completely of blood, and the heart wasn't beating. Well, duh. The heart's just a big pump, which is designed to pump the fluid around the body. And after a while, if there's no fluid for it to pump, it isn't going to carry on, the electrolyte balance will change, it isn't going to carry on beating. However, this is an absolutely lousy picture, but on the left-hand side, you can see Soledad has put a hand into a white cotton glove. She makes it into a fist, and that big reddy-black mass in the middle on the right, here, that's her hand. And that is a hole which is about the size of my fist, which is in the side of the chest of a goat which is still alive. Now, the wounds on the goat were very similar to the ones in Puerto Rico on the chickens, 2 little puncture marks on the neck, and a damn great big hole in the side of the chest. And I don't understand how it worked, this damn thing. And she put her hand into, she made her hand into the fist and put it straight into that hole. And when she drew this out, this is the most chilling piece of video I've ever seen. There was no blood on it. The white cotton glove was completely and utterly pristine. I've got the autopsy reports from the Mexican government at home, and the autopsy reports say, again, just like my chicken in Puerto Rico, completely drained of blood, and with the liver removed. And the same accounted for the other 8 creatures which have been attacked at exactly the same time. Now, this village, as a result of this, has become an absolutely appalling place. Like I told you, I can't speak Spanish. Like I said, I can just about buy cigarettes and find my way to the airport. But the headman of the village, not that, that's the headman of the village, the guy with the hat in the middle, he couldn't speak any English. But luckily, back sometime about 25 years ago, both of us had learned French at school. And we were communicating with each other in schoolboy French, pidgin English, and a few words of Spanish, and just waving our arms around. And I went, this is something that will remain with me for the rest of my life. I went to the headman, I said, Don Pedro, why is it here you have big 9-foot crosses, big crucifixes on the walls of every house in your village? And why are all the windows, even though it's incredibly hot, why are all the windows nailed shut? Señor, por protección de vampiros. And I thought, shit. This isn't a game anymore. I'm in the middle of a village in Mexico where they are deathly scared of being killed by vampires. And that was when I think I began to realise that vampires weren't Bela Lugosi. They weren't, the children of the night, what sweet music they make, but they were something very, very real and very frightening. Here we have Don Pedro showing that the place where the goat was found, and there, just to show the size of the crosses, there's some fat bugger with a camera around his neck standing next to one of them. And there, just because I promised you, a nice picture of Popocatépetl. Now, the sound man from the British Television Company asked me at the end of this to do a piece to camera and give my impressions of the village. And I said, I'm sorry guys, this is the most horrible place I've ever been in my life. And they said, you can't say that, you're denigrating their culture. I said, look at it. You've got 2 ruts down the side of each, one down the side of the road and one down the other side. That one's got dead dogs in it, the other one's an open sewer. On the corner you've got 9-year-old child prostitutes, and you've got the village priest being driven around with his mistress in the backseat of a Cadillac with motorbike outriders and an armed guard. Dude, this place is horrible. However, back to Puerto Rico. And as I said, we had a very, very kind and very useful police escort. And here we have the guy called Rubin. I'm not going to tell you his real name. And if any of you recognize him, please don't take it beyond this, because Rubin laid his career and his reputation on the line for me. Here he is, just with one of the Chupacabra witnesses. The main reason I'm showing you this, because it's a good picture of him with his hand in front of his face, so you can't see who he is. And here again, Rubin's taking me around farms where the Chupacabra has attacked. And there, oh dear, you can probably recognize him from there, but there he is with me in the police car explaining what happened. I asked Reuben what happened to the bodies from chupacabra attacks, and he told me, "Oh, hey, that's no problem, John, I can take you to the place." And he took me to this laboratory. Now look at this place. It's modern, it's clean, it's steel, it's glass, it's air conditioned. And if you compare that with the squalor that some of the poor people that I've been dealing with over the previous few weeks have had to live in, it's actually quite disgusting. He told me that this is the place where the bodies of chupacabra victims are taken. He took me up to the door with his colleague, we knocked on the door, and two big blokes in black uniforms with machine guns came up, and in words which I will not, because there are young ladies in the audience, I will not repeat, told me to get the hell out of there if I didn't want to get shot. Now, I've been in some weird places in my life, and I've done some very weird things in my life. It's not the only time in my life that I've had a gun pointed at me. It's the only time in my life I've had a gun pointed at me by somebody in authority. This is an incredibly strange place. Now, Reuben and I went off to a bar later and had a long talk. I believe, now I don't know American law. In England, you've got something called the Official Secrets Act, which if you sign it, it means you are privy to some information which ranges from being classified to being above top secret, depending what it is, and which you can be detained in prison for indefinite lengths of time if you break. I assume there is something else in American law, but I don't know what it is. I believe that Reuben knew damn well that there's something heavy going on here. He couldn't risk his job, he couldn't risk his post, so he took me there so I could see it for myself without him actually having to break the law. Now, you don't want to see that just yet. We went off to a bar and we got talking. It turned out that Reuben's family had come from New York and that his father had moved to Puerto Rico just after the Second World War. And he had become he'd first of all he'd been in the Navy, and then he became a liaison worker working with the Puerto Rican police force. I don't understand the intricacies of the structure of Puerto Rican police, but from what I can gather, he was some sort of a civilian guard working with the police. Now, in 1957, something crashed into El Yunque rainforest, about half a mile from where I am there, looking very intrepid. It, in the very real sense of the word, was a UFO in that it was A, an object, B, flying, and C, unidentified. Over the last 6 years, I have spoken to a number of other eyewitnesses, but the most important thing was on the night that the thing crashed, Reuben's father had been in charge of the civil defence and police people who were there to keep the general population away from the crash site. Now, I don't know what the thing that had crashed was. It may have been an alien craft, it may have been an American government craft, it may have been a Russian craft, it may have been a bomb, it may have been a meteor. I have no idea. But what I do know is that the ecosystem of Puerto Rico has never recovered. Here is a shot of El Yunque, which is the mountain in the middle of the rainforest, and below the thing, and I'll just point it out on here, is the crash site. I've got one picture of the crash site, which really has not come out very well. This is not because of any covert government interference with my equipment. It's just the fact that, especially at that time, we were working on a very low budget and our equipment was rubbish. That is the crash site, and again, through the magic of Adobe Photoshop, you can see an area there which is flattened out. And if you actually go down to the ground level of that, there is nothing growing there. And this event apparently happened in September 1957. I was there in February 1998. Now, I've been in rainforests on 4 continents, and I have come across areas before where nothing grows, and usually that is because it's on the side of the hillside and it's very loose clay, and when a plant gets heavy enough, it'll just landslide down, and eventually you just get an area of rotten and compacted vegetable matter. This isn't the case here because this was flat. I've never seen anything quite like it. It wasn't bare earth, but it was rotten leaf mould. It was an area probably half the size of this room where nothing grew, and that was in the middle of one of the most lush and deep rainforests I've been to outside of Africa. Now, I took photographs of this place and just purely for my own interest, I came back to England. It wasn't until I came back to England that I realised that I had missed the chance of investigating something absolutely extraordinary. Now, I'm a zoologist. My job is to study animals. Puerto Rico is a very has a very denuded ecosystem, and there are only 18 species of mammals on Puerto Rico, most of them bats, and that, which is the local race of your familiar opossum, is the largest indigenous land mammal in Puerto Rico. However, ever since 1957, there has been a whole string of extraordinary animals reported. Now, I went up into a cave system at a place called Aguas Buenas, and they wouldn't let us go into the bottom areas of the cave system, which apparently is about half a mile below where we were. But here is me and my team up in the top parts of the caves. Now, one of the things that has always interested me is small invertebrates. There is a famous book, and I believe it's one of Eric von Daniken's, which shows some drawings on drawings of carvings on a cave system in Puerto Rico on the walls. And they have pictures of what look, according to Eric von Daniken, surprisingly like a flying saucer. Like hell they are. They're pictures of this, which is one of the common edible snails of the Puerto Rican rainforest. And when you actually see the shell on its side, it looks ridiculously like a flying saucer. Now, this is a reasonably well-known species, and it lives on the broadleaf trees in the rainforest. However, in this particular area, which is, by the way, the stream which goes through the bottom areas of this cave, is the one which actually runs from the exact part of the jungle where the crash site is. And I believe that whatever it is that crashed into the jungle has done something remarkable to the stream and to the animals and to the ecosystem in the particular part of the forest where it crashed. But this stream goes completely through this cave system. And there, instead of this very pretty snail, which is eaten for food and lives on the forest trees, you have an identically shaped one, but the shells are greyish-white, and the creature is carnivorous. Something over a period of 40 years has turned one of the staple animals of the Puerto Rican ecosystem from being a herbivore into a carnivore. Now, believe me, guys, the idea of changing the complete metabolism of an animal species in just 40 years, from eating plants to eating flesh, and from living in the sunlight of the rainforest to only living in the dark parts of the caves, from a zoological point of view, that is completely and utterly unprecedented. But it gets worse. Ever since I was a little boy, I've always enjoyed messing around in streams and ponds. And while we were making the TV film, the TV crew were interviewing my partner, who was there, at the side of a river at a place called Canovanas. And Canovanas is the epicenter of all the chupacabra activity. And so I went off to muck around in the stream, in the river, for half an hour. When I was there, I caught a fish called a lamprey. Lampreys are the most primitive fish on the planet. They don't have hinged jaws like we do, like most fish do, like reptiles do, like birds do, like all other mammals do. They have a circular jaw with a grasping tongue, which they use to cut through. They're parasitic, and they use to cut through the flesh of other fish and suck their fluids. I've been studying lampreys on and off for something like 30 years. The first time I studied lampreys was in a little stream in North Devon, just a few miles away from where my family home is. And I've been fascinated by them ever since. And so when I caught this thing, I held it in my hands, I looked at it, played with it for 5 minutes, and thought, wow, this is cool, this is a really nice thing to see something I recognise from home, and I let it go again. When I got home, when I got back to England, I decided to, because I'd made a list of all the animals I'd seen, like I always do on my jaunts. If any of you saw me out wandering around the Walmart shopping car park earlier today, it wasn't that I was trying to escape from here, I was wandering around seeing what species of birds I could see in the trees. And so when I got back to England, I tried to identify. I had a list of all the animals I'd seen. There's no such thing as a lamprey in Puerto Rico. Even more so, there's no such thing as a lamprey in the Caribbean. Even more so, there's no such thing as a lamprey in warm water anywhere in the world. I had gone to Puerto Rico in search of a large vampiric animal which lives off sucking the vital juices of other creatures, and I discovered a small vampiric animal which lives off sucking the juices of other creatures. The Puerto Rican lamprey is completely and utterly unprecedented. If I can prove its existence, rather than just the eyewitness testimony of one bloke from England, it turns upside down everything that we know about the evolution of fishes. That is assuming that it is an ancient creature that has just lived here undiscovered for many thousands of years. However, could it be like the cave snails? Could it be something more recent? Now, here you have again pictures of me mucking about in a stream. Now, are any people here tropical fish keepers? No? One! I found a fellow fish keeper. One of the most famous fish, tropical fish in the world. And in fact, earlier, to use an amusing analogy, I heard Stanton Friedman describe himself as the grandfather of Roswell. Well, there was a fish called Gambusia affinis, which is the grandfather of the tropical fish keeping industry, because it was the first fish that any tropical warm water fish anyone could keep in captivity. It's a remarkable fish. It actually comes from, you can probably find it in the streams around here. It comes from the desert states of the southern USA and parts of Mexico. And the interesting thing about it is that it is very tolerant of water with low oxygen, and that was why it was so easily kept by the pioneer fish keepers, because they didn't have oxygen pumps in those days. And Gambusia affinis has also been introduced into various parts of the world because its main food is mosquito larvae, and it's been introduced as a deterrent against malaria. I caught one of these, and have a look at this. I have caught Gambusia everywhere from South China to Nevada, from Mexico to Puerto Rico, and even the south of France where they've been produced. This one is completely different. Look at the shape of its head. It's got a really weird, blunt, rounded head there. Just to show you, that's what it's supposed to look like. It's completely different, isn't it? I mean, that looks like a guppy with a long nose. It's got this really weird, rounded face. It's completely and utterly different. It was a Gambusia. It was swimming alongside other normal-looking Gambusia in a little shoal in the stream at Aguas Buenas, but it is completely and utterly different. Once again, it's another animal which seems to have evolved just in the last 30 or 40 years, just in the place where the runoff of the river is from the runoff from the place from the crash site. And the stream where the river actually rises is only about 100 yards away from the crash site itself. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to tell you if I actually found a fully grown mountain gorilla, but in 1958, 6 months after the alleged UFO crash, whatever it was, people started seeing gorillas in the outskirts, in the outside parts of the rainforest at El Yunque. And the gorillas would come in at night and steal sugarcane and steal bananas and the other crops which the peasant farmers had been farming. Gorillas. I mean, for heaven's sake, guys, there are only a handful of higher primate species apart from man in the world. You've got the pygmy chimpanzee, the gorilla, the mountain gorilla, the lowland gorilla, 2 species of orangutan, and various gibbons. There are no anthropoid apes in the New World. There is no fossil evidence of anthropoid apes in the New World, and it has been argued that as New World monkeys are so morphologically distinct from Old World monkeys, there is a long and very succinct zoological argument, the fact that there could not be apes evolved from New World monkeys. And as I said, Puerto Rico broke off from the Venezuelan coast thousands of years ago, many thousands of years ago, and the largest animal on Puerto Rico is a small possum. But for about 18 months, from the spring of 1958, for about 18 months, people were reporting gorillas. Then they disappeared. Nobody saw them again. That's a chimpanzee, as I'm sure you know. Again, an animal from tropical Africa. 3 or 4 years after the gorillas disappeared, people started reporting chimpanzees. However, these chimpanzees were unusual, because most chimpanzees, like gorillas, are knuckle walkers. They can walk upright for very short periods of time. But on the whole, they don't. They live a semi-arboreal existence. And the things when you see on the old Tarzan films of the chimpanzee walking on its hind legs and looking very human, the only way they could get it to do that was by tying splints to its back legs and training it. But people were reporting seeing small, hairy, dwarf-like creatures which looked like chimpanzees walking on their hind legs. Now, within the whole canon of ufological and Fortean literature, there are dozens of accounts from places in South America of small, hairy dwarfs. And small, hairy dwarfs have been seen in conjunction with UFOs for years. Now, something which I have discovered, and this continues up until the present day, is that whenever you have a spate of weird animal sightings in Puerto Rico, it always happens at the same time that there's a wave of UFO sightings. Don't ask me what the link is. All I'm saying is that there is a link. I don't know what the answer is, and I'm not going to insult you by standing up and trying to make one up, but there is somehow a strange correlation between UFO activity and arrival of weird animals. Because from 1957 to the present day, there has been a whole string of weird animals which are seen for a short period of time and then are never heard of again. That is a black vulture. And in 1972, there started being, and I am indebted to Scott Corrales, who I've never met, but I've corresponded with, and I think he's a fantastic guy. He told me about this. Starting in 1972, there was a whole string of sightings of what were known as the devil birds. And they were described as being like a black vulture, but with grafted onto the beak something which is like the spurs which they put onto roosters when they're doing cockfighting. Now, there are various species of birds which, when they are embryos and newly hatched, have a small tooth-like thing on the end of its beak, which they call an egg tooth, which they use for breaking out of the shell. But there ain't no such thing as a bird with a horn. But for 3 years in the early 1970s, people were reporting these almost on a daily basis. And then by 1975, nothing, completely stopped. 1975, people started seeing these dark green goblin-type creatures, and at the same time, now this is where I want you to, this is one of the paradigms that I want to try, that I believe in, that I want to try to communicate to you, that people, when they see a strange animal or a strange creature appearing, and something else weird happens at the same time, the obvious inference is that the strange animal they see, or the strange creature they see, is the creature which is causing the strange activity. But I think it isn't. I think that both of them are symptoms of something much weirder, much more complex, and much more difficult to understand. Because at the same time as these small dark green goblins were being reported, again, in exact same area, in the Dorado sector, in the areas around Aguas Buenas, and in the whole area that is irrigated by this one river which runs through Canovanas, which rises at that stream up in the middle of the jungle at the crash site. All these animals were in these places, but at the same time as the dark green goblins were seen, there started being a load of vampiric attacks around a town called Mocha. Vampiric attacks on domestic livestock, and the legend of a creature known as the Vampire of Mocha was born. Many people believe that these green goblins, whatever they are, were the things that carried out the attacks. However, there is no evidence for that. Nobody ever saw one of these creatures actually carrying out the attacks. They saw the creatures, they saw the attacks, and they put two and two together and made 5. Now, the Vampire of Mocha hung around from between 1975 till the end of 1977, or according to some reports, beginning of 1978, and once again it disappeared again. Now, guys, I'm sure you all know what that is. That is one of the North American porcupines. There is a big difference between North American porcupines and porcupines in the rest of the world. You can look, although they are distantly related, apart from the fact they've both got spikes, there's nothing really to compare them. These animals are found all across North and South America. There's a number of different species, and some of them are found on the outlying islands in the Caribbean, but none have ever been found in Puerto Rico. That animal, which is the great crested porcupine, is the largest of the old world porcupines, which are found everywhere from the Himalayas to eastern China, all across Africa, and even a few parts of Europe. In 1981, the farmers, again in the Dorado sector, were reporting that something was coming in the middle of the night and biting through the fibrous stems of their banana plants and ruining their banana planting crops. And according to one account, one of these animals was shot. Isn't it always the same? You hear a story about an animal being shot, or a body being found, or an alien being cut up, but what the hell happens to the bodies? Because once again, the animal was shot. I have spent the last 7 years trying to find out the person who shot it and find out what happened to the body. Nobody knows. But a creature very much resembling that, one of the African porcupines, was shot in lowland Puerto Rico. Now, there has never been an African porcupine, an old world style porcupine anywhere in the New World. One of the good things about being a zoologist is that you become part of what I call the zoo mafia. There is a sort of freemasonry between people who work in zoos all the way across the world. And you can get information on the quiet from somebody else who's in the zoo mafia, with somebody you may never have met, somebody you may never even be face to face, but just on the phone, because you're bound. It's a fairly small world, the zookeeping world, and people know people and people have mutual acquaintances. And I spoke to all the people who in the early 80s were involved in animal collections of any size on Puerto Rico, and I can confidently say that as far back as records go, from the 1950s up until the mid-1990s, nobody ever imported an old world porcupine onto Puerto Rico. The first one was actually imported to a small private collection in 1995. But 15 years earlier, in 1980, something highly resembling one of these porcupines turned up in the Puerto Rican rainforest. Where the hell did it come from? Now, that we end where we started off with the chupacabra. Now, I believe that the chupacabra exists. However, the chupacabra is the most complex and the most bizarre of the animals that I've been talking about today. It's also the one which is further away from any root species that you can mention. The weird fish that looked a funny shape, you know what species they came from. They came from Gambusia affinis. They're now something else, but we know what they are. We don't know how they got there, we don't know why they got there, and we don't know where they're going, but we know where they came from. We know what the root species is. The Puerto Rican lamprey, I have a sneaking suspicion, because the one that I saw was slightly different to most of the lampreys which I have dealt with in the past. I believe that the root species for the Puerto Rican lamprey is something called a hagfish, which is a deep water relative, a parasitic relative of the lamprey, which usually lives, it feeds on much larger fish, it swims into their gill slits, and essentially eats them from the inside. And I believe that the lamprey, which I caught in Puerto Rico, is a descendant of somehow one of these marine fish, which are known in that part of the world, has somehow mutated and become a freshwater fish. Again, for the idea of a marine fish becoming a freshwater fish, that would take hundreds, if not thousands of years. But it seems to have happened in 30 or 40 years. And I would like to hypothesize that the ancestor of my Puerto Rican lamprey was probably a hagfish living in the coastal waters of Puerto Rico, probably in the place where the river, which starts off in the place where the UFO, whatever it was, crashed, goes into the sea. And I think that whatever it is that has completely changed the ecosystem of that area is beginning to change the ecosystem of the offshore areas where the water from that river is feeding. The gorillas, the monkeys, the gorilla and the chimpanzee, where did that come from? Well, there are no monkeys. The only primate that has lived in Puerto Rico ever is man. However, in the 1930s and in the early 1940s, people did introduce various monkey species did take various monkey species to Puerto Rico for use in serum immunization experiments. One of the species which I know was taken was the chimpanzee. And we know that at least 5 of the chimpanzees escaped in the late 1940s. It has been suggested that there are still some remnants of the chimpanzee population still living there. But the way that the animals which were described, especially the one that looked like a gorilla, which is about 8 times the size of a chimpanzee, and the small hairy dwarfs walked upright on their hind legs, and even, according to some reports, even used tools. Again, could it be because the laboratory where the chimpanzees were being kept for research purposes, the laboratories were in, again, that sector of Puerto Rico? Could it be that some introduced animals which had escaped had somehow had their evolution accelerated by the results of this crashed UFO? I don't know. But it's the best guess that we've got at the moment. But we're left here. We've got the chupacabra. What the bloody hell is that? It doesn't look like any animal that one can come to terms with, except possibly some sort of a weird mutant kangaroo. That's not a very good picture. I chose it because I rather like it. But the reports which I've received of chupacabras, and I've spoken to 41 different eyewitnesses, have got much smaller front paws. It's just that that's about the only picture I could find of one actually looking straight on. I am wondering if some of the primitive people who live in the hills, because Puerto Rico may be a United States possession, well, it's not allowed to call them colonies, but it may actually be owned by the United States, but it is essentially a third world country, and there are still some very primitive people who live in the back and beyond, in the middle of the rainforest. I'm going to leave you with one horrible, chilling, disgusting thought. What if one of these primitive people who live, some of the primitive people who live in that part of the rainforest, did what I'm sure they do? They get their drinking water, they get their washing water, they get their cooking water from that same river. The river which, because of some bizarre alien intervention, and when I say alien, I mean alien being from outside, not necessarily from another planet, but something has changed the ecosystem so strongly that, I am afraid, is of the shape of what I think things in Puerto Rico are going to be getting like very soon. That is the shape of things to come. I want to go back to Puerto Rico. As I said, I am the director. How do I get rid of the thing?
I'll do it for you.
I am the director of the Center for Fortean Zoology. We are the world's only full-time professional cryptozoological organisation. There's only one more slide, mate, so I put it onto it. I want to go back to Puerto Rico. We are desperately, desperately underfunded. But I don't want to go back to Puerto Rico being, hey guys, I'm John who went to the UFO conference. We have all, for years, everybody in the UFO and Fortean community have been complaining that mainstream science does not take us seriously. Well, here is the chance to change that. I want to take a team back to Puerto Rico, and I am going to publish a paper in the Royal Zoological Society Bulletin, or in Nature, or in the World Wildlife Fund for Nature Scientific Bulletin, and it's going to be with a title something like "Increased Rates of Speciation Amongst the Small Invertebrates and Small Freshwater Fish in the Canalvenas River." I want to bring back samples of all these animals, bring them back to England, and I want to make them available. I want to try to breed them in captivity, and I want to make them available to scientists in Britain and in America to see if they breed true, and to prove that for some reason we have got a ridiculously accelerated rate of evolution. I am pretty sure that if I publish this in one of the zoological or biological journals, that I can prove my point, and that my thesis of accelerated evolution will be taken seriously. And that is where I come out and say, look dude, that is where the crashed UFO happened. Why else? Something crashed from the sky into that rainforest at the end of 1957. Can you think of anything else that can have caused this? I want to go back there, and I want to try and prove that the weirdest thing that is happening on planet Earth at the moment is right under all of our noses. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very much for having me. I could go on for hours, simply find out with the chat. I've got books, I've got magazines and stuff. Come and find me, buy me a beer, and we'll talk all night. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Jon.
Our next presenter is going to be, everybody want to stand up in place for 1 minute? Okay, just don't go anywhere. Hey, just a comment on the banquet. The banquet is sold out. However, it's like an airplane that will